Today, I'll show you how to paint this hairless cat in watercolor. So there's no fur, simply thin layers of color. This is an accelerated version of the painting to give you an overview of the process. You can watch the entire tutorial in real time in our watercolor school. Let's get started. I like to begin with the eyes. It establishes the personality. This is a pale gray map of what will be the darker lines and shapes. The gray is a mix of French Ultramarine Blue and burnt umber. Layer by layer, we'll establish the yellows and the browns and take the pupil darker to keep track of it. Reinforce what will be the darker parts, the shadow in the upper eye, around the edge of the iris and the pupil. Lay in bits of textures and smooth and unify with another layer of yellow. And the eyes are almost finished. Create a pale gray map of the lines and shapes in the nose and the mouth. We've got the eyes and the beginnings of the nose and mouth in place, and we'll move into the first pale layers of color. It's helpful to focus on one color at a time. This is a pinkish mix of permanent rose with a touch of yellow ochre. Establish the beginnings of what will be darker grays and browns and blacks. This is that same gray mix of French Ultramarine Blue and burnt umber. And what we're doing is creating a pale map of what will be the darker shapes. It's going to appear uncomfortable and sloppy, but keep moving forward. Layer by layer, it will come together. In real time, the process is slower. Lay in one small shape at a time and soften the edges with your clean, barely damp brush. This is what will be the darker shapes, and we'll return to take them even darker. So take your time, take breaks, and enjoy the process. Here, I'm mapping out where the darker lines will be. And it sure is looking sloppy, but keep moving forward. This pale map of colors is going to be helpful as we refine color and go darker. Early in a painting, I often focus on one smaller area, taking it almost to completion. And I'm doing that here with the ears. First, establish what will be the darkest parts. I'm using the brownish gray mix of burnt umber and ultramarine blue, focusing on anywhere that will eventually be a darker brown, dark gray, or black. And it's not the darkest yet. We'll come back to refine, but it's where the darker parts will be. Then move into midtones. Colors that aren't the darkest, but need to go a little darker. Apply thin layers of color or textures. If things begin to appear rough, smooth with plain water and your damp brush. Use thin layers to refine color, go darker, and create smooth transitions from dark to not so dark to light. And follow the same formula to create the other ear. What will be the darkest? Midtones, lightest values, thin layers of color or water to smooth and refine. The ears are almost finished, and they'll serve as a guide as we move into the face and the body. Revisit the darkest parts in the face, taking them a little darker. Allow it to appear uncomfortable and sloppy, and we'll return to refine color and go even darker. Apply thin layers of color or textures. This is the second layer of what will be the darkest parts. These dark values will serve as a guide in what to do with the midtones, where to go a little darker. Take your time. Take breaks. You want each layer of color to be completely dry before applying the next layer. I'm focusing now on midtones. What needs to go a little darker? Would you like to refine color? Here, I'm applying thin layers of a darker brown mix of burnt umber with a little bit of ultramarine blue. What needs to go a little darker in the body? This is a gray mix of burnt umber and ultramarine blue. Thin layers of color will help to smooth and unify. Step by step, we're refining color, going a little darker. Things are appearing pretty uncomfortable, but keep moving forward. And we'll repeat the process. Revisit the darkest parts. This time I'm refining the color using a dark brown mix of burnt umber with a little bit of ultramarine blue. I'm creating a textured look by gently touching in the color. This is the dark color I've been aiming for, and it took a couple of layers to get there. Let's take some of these areas a little darker with a slightly thinner consistency. As we do this, we're creating a smoother transition from very dark to not so dark. What needs to go a little darker? It might be thin layers or textures. It might take more than one application until things begin to come together. Take a step back, look at your painting from a couple feet away, and ask yourself, what doesn't look right? Does anything need to go a little darker? Do you need to create smoother transitions from dark to not so dark? Would you like to refine color? All of these browns and grays that I'm using are that mix of burnt umber and ultramarine blue with different amounts of brown and blue in the mix. As we progress through the painting, we're repeating the same steps over and over. Refine the darkest parts. Then the midtones, what needs to go a little darker. Give attention to the lightest parts. Think about creating smooth transitions in color and value. And anytime things begin to appear rough or disjointed, it's helpful to smooth with plain water or thin layers of color. When you're tired of looking at one area, go somewhere else. Ask yourself, what needs to go darker? Where would I like to change up the color? It might be small lines or shapes or larger areas. If you're not sure what to do next, stop looking at the painting for a couple of hours or even a day or two, because upon returning, you'll see with fresh eyes and the answers will come. It's helpful to look at the painting from a distance of 3 to 6 feet away. That will help you to see larger areas without the details getting in the way. Here, I'm applying very pale gray to most of the body. It's slightly smoothing and unifying everything. We're approaching the end of the painting, and I've taken a break. Upon returning, I'm revisiting the darkest parts, the midtones, taking one more look at the eyes, the nose, taking another look at color, applying thin layers to smooth and unify. This painting could be finished. What I'll do is stop looking at the painting for a couple of days. Then I'll bring it back out, place it on a shelf or hang it on the wall, and see if I need to make any small refinements. I hope you found this video helpful and enjoyable. If you'd like to watch the entire tutorial in real time, you can find it inside our watercolor school. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.